Hey there, this is Pete from Strymon. I'm here with our long-awaited, much-anticipated TimeLine MX delay. TimeLine MX takes the original concept of TimeLine and takes it a whole lot further. We have a variety of new algorithms and sounds and the ability to have two simultaneous effects in a variety of configurations and a whole lot more. TimeLine MX also includes a looper with a 5-minute recording loop time, and the looper can be positioned either before or after the delays. So we've got a lot to dig into, so let's get started. So let's check out the dTape machine. The dTape machine has two voices, the MX voice and the Classic. The Classic is the original dTape voice from the original TimeLine, and the MX voice is taken from our EC1 dTape delay. So they have some different characteristics. One of the characteristics that separates those two is under the grit control. In our MX voice, we're changing record level, so that hits the tape harder. So we have a nice continuous range of control over the level of the sound going into the tape, which will make the tape saturate. And if we switch to our Classic voice, now we see that the grit control is controlling tape bias, which is the original TimeLine dTape voice, which there's a difference here where the tape bias, increasing the tape bias, effectively decreases the headroom of the signal as more of the tape headroom is taken up by the bias signal. So you get more distortion as the bias increases, but it's not the same as actually hitting the tape process at a higher level. So it gives you just a different flavor. So we'll check that out. So there we hear the saturation coming up, but it's not really giving you the same kind of punch on the repeat. So it's just a little different variation on a tape delay. So we'll go back to explore the MX voice. When you just press the encoder here, you see a list of the parameters that are in addition to the ones that are across the knob set, which include low-end contour, voice, Crinkle, which is default for the dTape assigned to speed, while in Flutter, which default is assigned to depth. But those two knobs can be assigned any of these parameters, param1 and param2. The default is modulation speed and depth for the majority of these machines, and in the case of dTape, Crinkle is the speed and while in Flutter is the depth. And then a series of parameters that are common to all delay types that include your tap division, panning, output level. We see Swell and Duck and Duck release. Those are available for every delay type on TimeLine MX. In the original TimeLine, those are two different algorithms, Swell and Duck, but we've now made them parameters that are available, so any machine can be set to have a Swell or Duck effect. And then the following set of parameters apply to the preset as a whole. So if you have a 2-delay preset, these would apply to the preset as a whole, including boosting the entire preset, persist whether the preset remains or tails off when you bypass the pedal, expression pedal setup, and a few other kind of housekeeping accessories there. So let's go back to voice and select MX again. And now we'll just go back to our preset. See our record level. Here's the tape crinkle. While in Flutter. The filter is controlling the tape age, so we get maximum bandwidth. And as we increase it, the tape age increases and we lose that high end in the response. And of course, repeat and time. So like all the algorithms, we take care to make sure that when you turn the repeats up to maximum, it creates a nice pleasing set of harmonic overdriven elements as in this case the tape becomes more and more saturated as the repeats are coming back into that tape. And you can also access the infinite repeat experience by pressing and holding the foot switch. So now let's check out the dBucket machine. Like dTape, there's two voices, the MX voice and the classic. The classic voice is the original dBucket algorithm from the original TimeLine. The MX voice is based on our Brig delay, and we've broken out some of the extra parameters to match this feature set. This preset is saved with the MX voice, so let's check that out. For the dBucket machine, the speed and depth are controlling modulation speed and modulation depth. Let's turn the depth to minimum here just to hear the delay without any modulation. So the dBucket algorithm uses a variable clock process which preserves the integrity of the delay line. It just is read and written to at different speeds to change the delay time. So you can come back to where you were and hear the same audio without corruption from changing delay time. Those effects that really are part of the dBucket characteristic. And the filter controls the filtering in the delay, and as you turn it up, more filtering is applied. Let's have the filter at minimum and let's turn the time down a bit. So you get a variety of filtering that are based on kind of traditional analog delay type of response, where at the end it actually gets a little bit bandpass, a little peaking, which would be common where you're kind of trying to extend the perception of the bandwidth by peaking before it cuts. Again, back at minimum filter. And the grid controls the bucket loss, which is the accuracy of the charge transfer from each stage of the bucket brigade chip. So with loss at minimum, we're going to get the cleanest delay experience. As we turn that up, you hear more distortion products. And at lower delay times, the fidelity is also reduced. As the clock becomes slower, that charge transfer has more time to degrade, and also the system runs at a slower rate, which actually can introduce aliasing. So you hear the fidelity is much higher there at the fast delay. Now let's check out the modulation. So in the MX voice with no modulation, the output signal is essentially a dual mono. It's a centered kind of wet signal. And as we turn the modulation up, a stereo modulation is applied. modulation speed. And again, holding the foot switch down will introduce the infinite repeats. We see here on this patch a quarter note symbol next to the 1. The 1 denotes that this is delay 1, and the fact that there's nothing else displayed there, this is a single delay patch featuring only this one instance of the dBucket algorithm. Next to it, the quarter note denotes that we're at a tap division of quarter note. We can press the type encoder, and now it highlights the quarter note, and we can select different subdivisions. Quarter note, we got a dotted eighth, eighth note, triplet, 16th note, and golden ratio and silver ratio, and then unlocked. If it's unlocked, it means it won't respond to the tap. And these last three are really kind of highlighted for patches that are using 2 delays, and we'll get into that. The golden ratio, silver ratio, and unlocked, where you might have a 2 delay preset and you want one of the delays not to be impacted by the tap. So now let's check out the digital machine, and like the 2 we've seen already, there are some new voices. The digital includes the classic, which is from our original TimeLine delay, as well as 3 voices from our dig delay. So we go to the parameters here, and we see the additional parameters that are not immediately controlled by these knobs, and that includes the smear, which adds a diffused aspect to the repeats, a high pass, which has a variety of selections from off all the way up to 900 hertz to really remove the low-end content from the repeats. The repeat dynamics, which was a feature in the original TimeLine, it's kind of the opposite of ducking in a sense. Delays that have high feedback have, instead of, if you could say, kind of seeing a feedback decay that goes like this, it actually kind of stops off a little bit more abruptly, and in certain situations that can be nice to keep what are higher delay levels or higher repeats from continuing to build up and get in the way. And here's our voice, and we see the selections are the 2496 from our dig, which is very high fidelity, high bandwidth delay. ADM, which was an interesting 1-bit, highly oversampled conversion process that really lends itself to a unique kind of percussive attack on the repeats. And the 12-bit voice is based on low bit resolution delays that, along with the companding and filtering, give you kind of a little bit of a more mellow, just a hint of lower fidelity in kind of a nice 80s way. So let's just hear the different voices here. I'm going to, again, turn the modulation depth down to remove that from the equation here. Let's go filter minimum and grit minimum just to hear the kind of the pure delay experience here. So here's the 2496. Let's speed up the time so we can hear those repeats a little quicker. So there we hear the wide bandwidth of the of that 2496. Let's slow that down a bit. If we go to the ADM, that's where it's got this, especially on, if you give it a sharp attack, it really accentuates that. Essentially the 1-bit process introduces the most error at high frequencies and high discontinuities in amplitude, which is what happens when you attack a guitar. So it has kind of as a signature sound. And the 12-bit, which is again the kind of softer, lower fidelity. And then the original classic. All right, let's select the 2496 voice and then see the effect of some of these knobs, because even just within the digital delay with the filter, the grit, and the high pass and the smear, we can really get a wide range of delay tones. So we'll start with modulation off again. So the cleanest setup, everything is essentially off except for time repeats and mix, and this is the cleanest delay we get. Has some modulation. See the impact of the filter here? Let's add some grit. Now we can employ the high pass to take out some of that low end. Let's brighten that up. Let's go really high passed here. Let's check out the swell parameter. I've dialed up a digital delay with lots of repeat and a very high mix, very kind of on top of the whole process here. Let's see what swell can do with that. So the default is off, and then we can select swell time constants that determine how quickly the signal will swell in behind the dry signal. That's listed in seconds, so 0.7 seconds equals 700 milliseconds swell time. Let's see what that does. Comparatively to off. You could take a patch with a high amount of repeats and delays and put them into something that becomes just kind of a nice wash. So when the mix is not full, what the swell is doing is applying that swell envelope to the wet signal behind the dry signal. And when you go to full mix, what it does is it applies that swell envelope to the dry signal into the delay, so you can get the traditional like volume pedal swells into a delay. And that also works if you wanted to play a single note line. That would be like effectively using your volume control on your guitar, say. Speed that up a little bit. Next up we have drum. We did not have a drum algorithm on the original TimeLine, so this is a new addition, and it's based on our Volante Delay's drum mode, which is based on a electromechanical delay that uses a cylindrical drum that has a magnetic wire wrapped around the edge with 4 playback heads in a single write head, so that as the drum spins, we have multiple taps to select to listen to the signal that's been recorded onto that disc. Let's check out how that works. We'll go into the parameter list. The first parameter that comes up is head edit, and that's the configuration of the machine. All is happening here. So here we see the top 4 circles represent the playback heads, whether they are enabled or half enabled or off. So as we go through the list here, by turning the value encoder, we see playback head 1 is off, denoted by the empty circle. Playback 2 is on at a level of half, so it's a 6 dB drop from full. Heads 3 and 4 are both on, and then in the second row we can see that all heads have their feedback enabled to feedback into the input, and we can also see that even though head 1 isn't playing back, it's not being routed to the output, it can be fed back. Its tap, its signal can go back and contribute to the output. And then on the bottom row we have panning, which is available for each head. So with all the heads set to feedback, we get this sound. So what's happening there, with all heads feeding back, this is set to an even spacing, essentially kind of like 16th notes. That first 16th note feeds back and essentially will populate all the heads. So the first time around we hear the panning, and we hear it go far left and right from heads 3 and 4, but then heads 3 and 4 subsequently will get signals at the same time because of the quick feedback from head 1, and the panning essentially kind of collapses to the center. So let's check that. So we get a sense of panning, and then it kind of settles in the middle as everyone's getting a signal simultaneously. So while one's to the right, one's simultaneously getting this feedback from the left, so you get something center. If I now go and defeat all the feedback from heads 1, 2, and 3 and leave only the last delay to repeat, we will now maintain that stereo panning effect as the signal rolls around and lights up each head one at a time. So that we can hear the stereo field as it maintains its original panning. So the more you work with this, the more you get a feel for how to achieve certain sounds, but it's always a fun learning experience just to light up some of the heads and see what comes out. So for example, let's also add feedback to head 3, but leave the feedback to head 1 and 2 off, so it'll maintain its stereo, but we're going to get kind of a little bit of a different cadence to it, and it will tend to reduce some of that impact of that stereo panning over time. So again, just head 4. So that we get a different cadence. With the panning and the half levels, there's plenty to do there. Let's check out the effect of some of the other parameters. There's the low cut. Again, modulation, speed, and depth. The filter controls the high end. Many of these old drum units, similar to tape units, the alignment of the playback heads to the medium itself can have a profound impact on the fidelity of the repeats, which is why we can have low cut, extreme low cut, or string filtering with the low end. So that's quite a range there. And then the grit is adding distortion products and harmonics to the whole thing. Some filtering at high grit will really kind of also give you kind of a dirty delay. And the repeats acts as an overall repeats level, so that the heads that are set to feedback are all controlled by the repeats. So if we turn the repeats to minimum, we'll hear just one set of the playback heads. All right, so let's turn the repeats back up and check out the. Let's get the filter and the grit, clean that up a little bit more, and let's check out the spacing parameter here. So even is the 4 heads are evenly spaced. In fact, let's actually go back and select all the heads to be on. So there we go. Now we've got all heads on. So we hear the even cadence of that. And we'll go back to spacing. At triplets now, we have a triplet-based pattern, and we start with a couple of 16th note triplets because we have 4 heads to listen to and to squeeze into a triplet pattern. So there you can hear, we'll slow that down. We have the golden ratio, which puts the relationship of each head at the golden ratio, 1.618, times the delay of the previous head. So head 2 is 1.618 times head 1, etc. So that gives us a set of like non-overlapping repeats, in a sense, that kind of create the densest accumulation of repeats. And then we have the silver ratio, which is almost kind of like an inverse golden ratio, where instead of the space between the heads growing, the space between the heads is actually shrinking, so they're kind of more bunched up towards the end. It gives you kind of a different vibe, but the last two are interesting when you want to just kind of create a little more space and atmosphere, and not something that's kind of overtly rhythmic. Next up is the oil can delay, which is a new algorithm for TimeLine, and it's based on our Olivera delay. The oil can delay is a 3-head system that allows you to select a short delay or a long delay or both simultaneously. The delays are created by recording an electrostatic charge on a rotating disc with an oil lubricant that acts as a dielectric and a lubricating medium for the system, and there's no erase head either, so this electrostatic charge basically has a time constant where it decays naturally as it's written to, and there's some interesting results that come about because of that. Another aspect to the uniqueness of the oil can, there's actually a couple more. One is the recording medium, the process of this electrostatic charge. It's a very low bandwidth process. It's not a high fidelity. In fact, I think the inventor was kind of amazed that it actually worked, but it's very low bandwidth, dark, murky, atmospheric repeats. The other unique aspect is because of that remaining decaying static charge, the first echo is heard at the distance from the record head to the playback head, but then the subsequent echoes appear at the rate of the rotation of the disc. The entire disc it's longer than that first echo, so you get this arrhythmic kind of off-kilter cadence to the echo, and that's even with no repeats dialed up on the knob. So here's a preset with the oil can delay. Let's check out the parameters. Head select is really the kind of top level parameter here that sets the configuration, where you can select the head to create a long delay, a short delay, or both simultaneously. We've got long selected, and let's check out what that sounds like. Let's go with repeats at 0 to hear that effect of the decaying static charge. So there you hear the first repeat sounds like it kind of jumped the gun. And when you turn the repeats up, now as it feeds back, you get this interesting thing where you get a succession of repeats that are happening, not on top of each other because of that unique configuration of this delay type. When we select the short head, we'll hear some similarity in the overriding delay time based on the rotation, but the very initial repeat will be shorter. So let's dial back the repeats on the knob here to kind of highlight that and switch between the heads. Short head, so you get kind of a slap, and then the decaying static charge. And this one, the delay's longer on the long head, but if we listen to the delay time of that decaying charge, it's identical because that's the speed of the rotation of the disc. So now if we select both, and the spacing of them is such that when we bring the repeats up, we get to a kind of a mushy wash pretty quickly. Another characteristic of these systems is they typically didn't rotate uniformly as it was fighting the mechanics to create kind of a modulation at that speed of the rotation of the disc, and that could be pretty prominent. And then on top of that, there were units that actually used a spring to purposely warp the rotation so that it would go slower as it fought the spring as it expanded and then get accelerated. So that can really create some interesting modulated delays that have a kind of unique characteristic to it that are available here with the modulation controls. Let's check that out. So now let's select the short head. We'll keep repeats at minimum, and let's bring time to minimum, and just experiment with the speed and depth to create an oil can modulation. Let's bring the mix up pretty high on this to kind of emphasize the wet signal in the modulation. The filter gives us a range of fidelity. Filter at minimum, in the units that we experienced, that's more bandwidth than you would get in any of these units, but I like to have that range possible to use it with, get a little more high end there. At 12 o'clock is indicative of units that we took a look at. Just a very kind of band pass, narrow response there. And then even more dark and murky at the maximum here. So let's play around here a little bit with modulation. So you really can get some very kind of warped or bring it back for something that's less prominent. And the grit adds another element of randomization and higher frequency uncertainty to the rotation of the disc to lend another aspect of dirt to the sound. Let's reduce the modulation here so we can hear just the effect of the grit. One of the ways I like to use the oil can delay is to select the long delay and actually turn repeats to minimum and increase the bandwidth to maximum and set the speed to kind of match the delay, and just roll the mix back to be unobtrusive, kind of behind the scenes, always on delay. Maybe speed that up a bit here. I find something about the lack of on-tempo repeats to really work well as something that's just when you want a little bit of extra space after your notes. So a lot of cool sounds available with oil can in a very kind of non-traditional delay sort of way. Next up in the dial we have MultiTap, which started from the feature of the original TimeLine, which is our pattern delay, and has been greatly expanded to add quite a variety of new features and possibilities. So this one's going to be a little bit deep as we dive in, but it should be a lot of fun. So what MultiTap is a collection of 8 delay lines or an 8-tap delay line that can be configured in a number of ways with individual filtering, panning, level, feedback, and modulation assignments per tap or per delay line. So the possibilities are pretty wide. So here we've got a preset called Even Diverge, and what this does is it's a simple kind of repetitive on the 8th note beat, panning starting from center and then going right to left, and then wider right to left, and finally full right to left. Sounds like this. So you can hear the repeats at the end of that pattern, doing a wider pan. If you had headphones on, you'll certainly hear it clearly. Let's just bring the repeats down to hear that, one segment of that. So now what we're going to do is take a look under the hood here, under the parameters. Config is it's kind of where it all happens. So we hit config, and now we see a multitude of parameters and information come up. And what this does is it assigns the 7 knobs across here as indicated on the display. So to set the step, we would adjust the time knob. To set the repeats, and so on. Filter cutoff, modulation, pan, and level. And these are all based relative to what the knob is when you're out of this configuration editing. So as we change our time, the entire pattern will shift to get faster or slower. As we increase the repeats, the individual taps will repeat more or less based on where they were. So like the master level of controls still works, and these are to tailor each individual tap. And then the next important part of this is this routing configuration, which is indicated by these like these three sliders, and that gives you three very powerful aspects of the pattern, the multi-tap delay, and they're labeled that tell you the grit will control the pattern, which is currently on custom. Parameter 1 will control the grid, where you can set a 16th note grid, triplet grid, or have the grid off to get non-synchronized delays. And feedback parameter 2 is really very powerful, where it sets a few different configurations. So right now the feedback is in input mode, and we'll go back to the configuration, after we explore a little bit about the heads here. So we're at a 16th note grid. We see the step is 1, 3, and this is like in DAW notation. At 16th notes, we get 4 subdivisions per bit. So this is essentially giving us 8 notes. It's bar 1, subdivision 3, and then as we turn value, we'll see the parameters for each individual head. Then we got bar 2 on the downbeat, bar 2 on the upbeat, 3 third 16th note, etc. So 3 1 3 3 1 4. So that's how we get even pattern, and then we can see that the filter is off for all the heads. And if we look at the pan as we select the heads, we'll see the first 2 are centered. Head 3 is going to the left, head 2 to the right, and that's out of maximum of R6 and L6. So then we go to left 4, R4, and then left 6, right 6. So those are full panning at the end. So that's how we get this pattern. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's add some filtering to these taps. So in tap 1, we'll keep the filter off for the first 8th note. Now we're going to add the filter. We have different filter types. Off, low pass 1, which is just a gentle roll off filter, and then low pass 2, which is a peaking low pass filter. Then we have a high pass, and we have a peaking high pass, and then we also have a band pass, and then a peaking band pass, a low shelf, and a high shelf. So there's really quite a variety of filtering you can add, and this is on a per tap basis. So let's, I like the peaking low pass. We'll keep the cutoff now is under this knob. Let's put that back to a kHz. Now at 3, we'll maybe select a peaking high pass and give it we'll bring the cutoff down to allow more signal throw. And just so on, just kind of experiment. Let's see what we've done here. So you can hear each tap individually filtered as set here. And, it doesn't really take long at all to kind of get accustomed to, making these adjustments. As you turn the value knob, you just select the head, and then this set of knobs is controlling that. So it's really a nice interface to get a lot happening in a short amount of time. So if we press and hold to go back to our kind of master setup, we can see now if we turn the repeats up, let's speed that up some. So we hear that this pattern is repeating, kind of from the end. And we'll look at the repeat setting for these heads. We see repeats 0. That means no matter where the master repeat is, we aren't going to allow any repeat from that head. So we can add some repeats from some other heads. We'll just grab a couple here and put those at the maximum, and see how that impacts the pattern. So here actually, as it repeats, it gets a little more complex because there's more feedback happening in the sequence. So it kind of breaks down in a way, it evolves higher. So that's kind of cool there too. Now let's go back to configuration, and we'll make a simple but dramatic change here. So we've got parameter 2 here, the feedback is set to input. That means every tap in this delay line that is selected to feedback by its individual amount will just feed back to the input. If we change this from input to parallel, what we've done now is reconfigured the entire multi-delay to be 8 individual parallel delay lines that don't interact and are just summed in parallel. So we'll hear what a change this makes. So we've got some repeats there assigned to some of the delays, and the delays that are the longest are going to repeat the longest. So you have something that kind of is dense to start with and then becomes less dense as some of those delays aren't repeating at all, and now you're just kind of left with the length of the delays themselves. So that gives you kind of an instant, very different experience. So let's slow this tempo down a little bit here and check out the grid parameter. So we're currently in 16th note grid, which is 4 equal subdivisions per beat, and we're playing every other one of those subdivisions to give us 8th notes. If we go to triplets, there we can hear the triplet feel. The last selection is grid off, and when we have the grid off, we see that under the steps, now we have a series of numbers from 1 to 256 maximum, which represent taking a 4-beat pattern and dividing it into 256 steps. So we can now have a very fine resolution to get kind of off-beat, non-rhythmic patterns. Let's go back here and let's add some repeats to some of these taps to get a little more complexity. So now when we exit here with no repeats, that's our pattern. Now we're going to turn the repeats up, get some modulation going here. So by having a variety of these non-rhythmic taps feeding back into the input, it gets a very quick kind of reverberated wash. The interesting thing about it also is, you can't. It sounds like a kind of a nice sustained wash too, but really there's more complexity in it. The filtering we have on each tap is being fed back and repeated, and gives you a little more life than kind of a traditional reverberant experience. So let's go back to configuration, and we'll go to the routing page here, and we see that this is our custom pattern that we have with the grid off, giving us this non-synchronized delay pattern. We can also select classic 1 through 16, which are the original patterns that were in the timeline under pattern delay. So pattern 1 in the timeline is a simple ping pong delay. So there's pattern 1. And any of the 16 patterns are available reconfigured here, and we see that automatically it sets grid to 16th, feedback is correct, so they're all kind of baked in there. So if you had a classic pattern that you like, they're available here at simple recall. So here's a patch I dialed in where we're creating 2 taps that are very short delays. The grid is off. Let's see our configuration here. Grid is off and the feedback is input, but we've selected our first 2 what I'm going to call the chorus heads, and the repeat is off. We don't want any feedback from them. And then into a longer delay, which is essentially 1 beat. It's 256 is a 4-beat pattern, so 65 is going to land you on the beat of a 1 beat based on the tap tempo. So we've got essentially a quarter note delay for taps 3 and 4, where I'm panning them left a little bit left and right, and then 2 very short taps panning hard left and right to create essentially a kind of a wide stereo chorus into a delay line. And now we add a little filtering and some modulation here, and we get nice kind of ambient chorus delay. The spectral delay is a new algorithm that is not based on anything from a previous product. It uses a granular process to look at pieces of the audio signal and kind of rearranges them and mangles them and brings them back into the audio signal in an interesting manner that can create a wide variety of sounds that can have some surprises and some unexpected results. We'll start with this preset and then kind of bring it back down to its basics as we explore the parameters, so we can build up a preset with some understanding of what the individual parameters do, because there's quite a few parameters that have a very big impact on the output of the sound. So that preset's got a lot going on, some interesting sounds and textures. So let's take a look at some of those parameters and see how they impact the sound. First is grain shape, and we see we have several to choose from. The preset we heard is using the soft grain shape. Now the grain shape is just an envelope that's applied to the snippet of sound that is being manipulated. Soft is an envelope that has a slow attack and release. Swell has a slow attack and a faster release. Soft pluck is a faster attack and a slow release. Pluck is a very fast attack. Bounce has a fast attack but adds a randomized filter element to kind of further diversify some of the sounds. Let's go to pluck, as that's kind of the most apparent to hear how that impacts the sound. So this same preset with pluck, there we can clearly hear those attacks. If we go back to soft, we hear the more gentle nature of that. So we'll keep it on pluck. Now the next parameter is high pass, which is just a standard high pass filter and many of these other delays. So we'll leave that where it is. Spread will take the individual grains and randomly place them throughout the delay time. Let's reduce that to minimum. Now see how that is impacting the sound. There's still some stuff going on there, but you start to hear even more of a kind of traditional timed delay there. Direction is the playback direction of the individual grains, so we can play them forward or in reverse or both, which will randomize the direction of the grain. This patch was reversed grains. Let's go forward. Compared to reverse. So we hear the difference there. We'll keep it on forward. Octave will randomly play back some of the grains at an octave up. That's at 0. We'll keep it there. Density sync is whether the grains are played in time on a grid based on the delay time, or whether they're free running, not attached to the delay time. The sync is currently on. We'll keep it there. And then density is how often we are looking at the input signal to create the grains. And as we increase the parameter, 1 to 8 means we will look at the input at 8 equally spaced times during that delay time to create grains. It was currently set at 2/3, which is why there's some kind of not synchronous events going on. Let's put that to 1 to 1. See how that impacts the sound. So now we're seeing that it's actually lined up with our delay here. Stretch will apply a random stretch to some of those grains. We'll also reduce that to minimum. So now we have something that's essentially the bare bones spectral delay algorithm without these other parameters having an impact on the sound. So there we hear essentially a delay that's at the tapped delay time. The spectral process is occurring in the frequency domain, which means there's a conversion in and out of the frequency domain, and it gives a characteristic sound to these grains, which even when they're not being processed by these other parameters has a uniqueness to it. And as we increase repeats, it also has an interesting way of changing tonalities. It feeds back, and we'll check that out in a little bit here. So now let's slow down the tempo, so that will really allow us to hear some of these parameters as we increase the time between events here. So as it repeats, we hear that envelope and the artifacts of the process coming into play as part of this spectral process. So now let's go back to density and increase that 1 to 4. So now we should be hearing essentially 4 grains per beat. There's 8 per beat. So we hear how density is now creating more events, looking at the audio, at more frequent points. Now, if we go back to density sync and turn it off, when we return to density, we see now that density is set to 103 milliseconds. So now this is not tied to the delay time or to the tap tempo. It's running at a fixed rate, so every 103 milliseconds it's looking at a new grain, and we can bring that down to a minimum of 6 milliseconds, which will be very fast. To a maximum time of 250 milliseconds. At a quarter of a second, it'll be looking at the audio again to create a new event. Let's go back to density sync and turn that on again. Spreads at minimum, which means the grains are being looked at and played back in time. And if we increase the spread, it'll take those grains and scatter them randomly across the time field. So there we can say as we increase the spread, we get a much more frequent set of events happening. So now let's go to the stretch parameter, which will randomly take these grains and time stretch some of them to give an interesting, overtly electronic feel to some of these grains as they're played back and stretched. All right, let's bring the density back down to 1. Let's bring that to maximum. So there you hear the randomized stretching, which leads to some interesting audio effects. Let's select the bounce shape to add some randomized peaking filters to those grains and increase the spread. Let's do both density sync. We'll come back to some multiples and keep stretch on. And let's go back to the octave and bring some octave in there. So the spectral delay is really about experimentation and coming up with sounds to inspire, and like that set of parameters I probably had never dialed in particularly before, and it was a new experience, and there's many more in there for sure. And just for a point of reference, this is the preset we started from. So endless possibilities here with the spectral delay. Next up we have the reverse delay, which, as implied, takes your input audio and turns it around backwards and plays it back with the regenerating repeats in reverse. Let's slow the tempo down here. And filter and grit, smear, and high pass parameters are all available, along with mod speed and mod depth, to tailor the psychedelicness of your reverse experience. Next up is the ice delay, which will take the audio in the delay buffer and in various selectable slice sizes and play them back at selectable pitches. So let's take a look at this preset, and the parameters available with the ice delay are the interval, where we can select anywhere from an octave down, then we proceed in half steps, every half step available, and then we get micro tuning, 50 cents, 25 cents, and then we can go intervals that are up, and again, everything available, octave, including octave, a fifth, and 2 octaves. This preset has an octave. You can hear it there, it's very subtle. Let's increase the blend, which brings in a stronger amount. So there, at maximum, we hear that it's kind of dominating the signal. Let's reduce the delay time here, and then check the different slice selections. So here I'll just play a descending scale, and we'll hear the length of the phrase that's coming back, selecting the long time slice. And as the regeneration happens, each of the octave ups goes continuing octave up. Let's do the same thing with the short slice time. So we hear how it's taking a smaller slice of that audio and regenerating it up. Let's go to medium and bring the blend back a bit. So let's select an octave down and hear the effect of that. Let's select a fifth interval and introduce some grit and some filtering just to show some of the textures that you can get on the ice delay. Next up is our lo-fi delay, which has a variety of ways to kind of mash and mangle your sound. This preset uses sample rate reduction to create an aliasing characteristic, kind of a buzzing nature, as the upper frequencies are aliased back into the audio band due to the reduced sample rate. Almost to the effect of a ring modulator. So let's take a look at the parameters. We have sample rate, which we see in this has been dialed down to 5 kilohertz. If we increase that up to 96 kilohertz, we hear there's no audio artifacts there. So let's dial the sample rate up to maximum and check out the bit depth at 32 bits. It's a clean delay. Let's open the filter up all the way here. And even at 16 bits, we're really going to be hard pressed to hear much of a degradation there. As you continue to reduce it, we hit a point where the signal waveform is really getting severely distorted by the lack of resolution. As we go further, we really start to truncate the tailing decay of the signal. As the signal gets smaller, it's essentially not lighting up enough bits to hear the resolution. So it starts to get dominated by the noise of these kind of now increasingly big but low resolution bits. So the filter can come in nicely to kind of tame some of that, to give you the grunge without quite as an abrupt effect there. Now the minimum delay time on lo-fi is 2 milliseconds. That allows us to actually dial in some nice chorus and flange type of tones. Or if we bring the mix to maximum, we can actually kind of use the lo-fi settings as a real-time lo-fi box. The next parameter is lo-fi mix, which in this case is maximum. The mix is the mix of the unaffected dry signal and the signal that's been affected by bit depth and sample rate reduction. So that's another way to tame it. Instead of just using the filter here, we can dial back the relative mix. So now we have introduce our dry signal. We can get that dirty kind of ratty sound at some level desired below the dry signal. But let's increase the bit rate again and play around with the speed and depth, modulation speed and depth, and the repeats to get some chorus and flange sounds. So we'll dial in a fair amount of wet here at 2 milliseconds minimum. So we'll bring a pretty heavy mix in here, and if we dial the time to say 10 or 12 milliseconds, those are traditional chorus delay times. You get a pretty nice chorus. We'll reduce it further and bring up some repeats. Then we get the traditional flange sounds. Let's go further, bring the repeats all the way up. At maximum, it's oscillating there. Let's bring it back a bit. Another parameter we have is vinyl, which will introduce scratches, pops, dust, vinyl noise. We can just add that in. Give you the vibe of being back in the days where you put on your records and your headphones. And now we have a series of filters that will impact the delay on top of that and impact the vinyl noise, which can really kind of set you into different errors and different moods. So right now the filter is off. So those speaker shapes are vintage, which is like a small speaker vintage amp response, Victrola with the horn, a 70s clock radio, a bullhorn, the cheerleader's megaphone, antique telephone, cell phone, and intercom. And you can hear them working on the vinyl noise there. Let's set the lo-fi mix back to maximum and increase the bit depth, but we'll set sample rate back to its original preset value here of 5 kilohertz. And we'll silence the record player here. And I want to show the impact that the grit can have, especially on the sample rate reduction, as the grit introduces distortion into higher harmonic products that will impact the amount of aliasing in the experience there. Let's also turn our filter off, and now we will just listen to the impact of grit. Here's with minimum grit. Let's increase the grit. And the filter, this is the overall filter, is also effective for changing the response and in this case, kind of taming some of those higher products. Next up, we have filter delay, where we've combined what was on the original timeline, the filter algorithm and the tremolo algorithm, the trem delay algorithm. Now they both reside in the filter delay on Timeline MX. This preset features a tremolo that's at 4 times the rate of the tap tempo, and we'll start there and then adjust some parameters and see how it works. Parameter list starts with the filter parameters LFO, which adjusts the shape from variety to choose from. Square, sines, ramp, saw. Down and up are based on attack, creating an envelope, so it's not cyclical. Each attack will go either down or up in frequency once until it sees another attack. Speed is as a ratio of the delay time, so 1:1 would be 1 LFO cycle per tapped delay time or set delay time. 2:1 means there would be a faster rate twice per tempo, and of course reduced rates down to 1/32 means it's going to take 32 delay times for the waveform to complete its cycle. Then filter depth, which is currently off, just sets a range of sweeping of the filter, and the filter Q sets the sharpness of the filter. We'll look at all of these here in a short time. The trem LFO gives another selection of shapes to choose from, and the speed the same way. It's set as a ratio of the delay time, so here's the 4:1 that we heard. And the depth goes from off at 0 to full amplitude at maximum, and then from here it's the standard rest of the parameters, including the high pass and the mod speed and depth and so on. So let's take this sound that we've got and apply a sine wave LFO that's at 1/16 of the rate of the tempo. So it's going to take 16 repeats to complete its cycle. Let's set the depth to about halfway here, and we'll keep our filter more open. This is like the rest of the delays, no amount of filtering, or in this case the highest center frequency. So let's see what we get here, and let's turn the repeats up since we're going to take 16 to get to a full cycle. So there we hear the filter sweeping across the 16 repeats. Let's speed that up. Let's go 4:1, and let's increase the Q, because that'll have a dramatic effect on the sweep, in the sense that sharper Qs, we're accentuating a narrower band of frequencies, but at a larger amount as it sweeps. Let's change the filter shape. And the speed, let's actually kind of trade places. We'll go, let's go 1:1. Let's go saw to reverse that. Let's select the random filter type and let's increase its speed. Let's remove the tremolo. So now we'll just hear the filter. Let's really crank up the Q. So you can experiment with shapes and ratios and cues and tremolo and come up with some pretty complex or atmospheric sweeping delay types with the filter. Next we have a reverb, which is a versatile, wide-ranging reverb capable of creating very small closet-sized spaces to long, sustained washes. And the controls are still familiar. Grit will add some distortion and harmonic product to the wet signal. Filter allows varying amounts of bandwidth in the regeneration. The speed and depth, we actually took a cue from our Flint reverb, and those control a tremolo of the wet signal. So you can get an interesting trem reverb just on its own through the reverb slot here. And the way the reverb works is time sets the pre-delay and repeats sets the decay as the individual delay lines that make up the reverb get more regeneration as you turn the repeats up. So let's start at minimum repeats, which is minimum decay time, smallest space. If we bring the mix down, we can get just a little bit of space around the note. Add some more filtering. Bring the repeats up. So yeah, there we're getting nice hall sounds there. Opening the filter a bit allows the fidelity to come through more. Let's increase the pre-delay here. So that gives you a nice range of reverberant tones. Let's check out the grit here. Let's bring some filtering in. The grit will really kind of light up as you turn it to higher settings. So the grit adds some distortion into the reverb and then also after the reverb, so you can really get this kind of a lo-fi reverb that's being distorted, which gives it a lot of character. Now let's check out applying a tremolo to that wet sound. And like Big Sky MX, one of the important features of TimeLine MX is the ability to have two effects running at once. And they can be combined in any configuration, series, parallel, swapped, or split. So in this preset, we have a lo-fi delay that's set up like a flanger running into the dTape delay. So we see the screen shows us delay 1 is highlighted as the lo-fi delay, and if we push the value encoder, we see the parameters available to edit that lo-fi sound. If I press the type encoder, it now highlights dTape, and we see that we're editing delay 2, and the dTape parameters are now shown on the screen. I press and hold the value encoder to get us back to our main screen, and now if I press the type encoder, I go back to delay 1, I press it again, and now I have the ability to set a tap subdivision for delay 1. I'm going to keep it at unlocked because we don't want the flanger to be subject to any of the anti-tap events. If I press it again, now we're at the configuration block where we can select series, which is the current default for this preset. We can select parallel, where now the flanger won't be feeding the dTape delay. They'll both be mixed in parallel and sent to the output. So there you hear the initial flange, which of course doesn't really have repeats in a sense, and the dTape delay isn't repeating flange notes, it's just repeating, it has a parallel path. So back to series, and you can hear that the dTape is receiving those flange. We can also change the order of the series, which will probably be a pretty subtle impact. But the dTape's outputs are getting flanged in this case. If we select split, now we have delay 1, the flange will come out on the left speaker, and delay 2, the tape will come out on the right speaker. You hear that? And now we can split swapping channels. To show the versatility of what you can do with the routing capabilities and the variety of delay engines on TimeLine MX, I've dialed up a patch that does a pretty good emulation of a Leslie speaker, and let's just hear how effective it is. So what's going on here is I've used our filter delay and lo-fi delay to create a separate rotating drum and rotating horn voice. So the lo-fi is the horn voice, and we take advantage of the very short delay times available. In this case, a 27 millisecond delay with some modulation on it to create a Doppler effect. And then also I've added in a filter shape, and I've selected a filter voice, the cheerleader's megaphone, which happens to have a very nice response that mimics that horn voicing in a Leslie. So the Doppler and the filtering gives us that horn voice, and the mix control on the lo-fi is essentially the horn level. And because the horn and rotating drum are happening synchronously, I've selected a parallel configuration. So both of these effects are being processed but are not influencing or feeding into the other. They're happening in parallel, as happens in a Leslie. So now for the drum voice, I've used a filter delay at 60 milliseconds, which actually helps give a little bit of space to the patch, and then selected the triangle LFO and a filter speed that is 1/3 of that 60 milliseconds. It turns out to be about the right speed of a rotating drum on the fast speed of a Leslie. And then the filter depth modulates the corner frequency to create that kind of a low-end throb of the drum. And then I set the mix control to maximum because I wanted to hear just this low frequency, throb of the drum without any dry signal mixed in. But if I turn the mix back, we'll hear more dry signal, and that drum will essentially disappear. And then using the exact same principles and just changing the speeds of the rotation of both those separate sections, I created a slow Leslie patch. So if you're feeling creative, there's a lot of ways you can use this that I'm sure we haven't even thought of. If we press and hold for 3 seconds, the value encoder, we get to the global parameters. And some important ones here are input level, which can be selected between instrument and line. For hot signals, line will allow extra headroom and dynamics in the wet signal. In my current setup, I'm running Iridium at a pretty hot level into the TimeLine, so I've selected the line level here. If I was running my guitar straight in, I would select instrument in order to get the most range for grit parameters and things like that. And there's also the usual suspects here. There's one that's important that I'd like to bring attention to, and that is I/O configuration. So this is normal configuration, which has stereo in, stereo out, with each input being a mono input. We could also select effects loop mono, where we go mono into delay 1, and then mono out to a send and return loop, and then into delay 2, and then to the output. We also have a stereo effects loop, and what's happening in the hardware for TimeLine MX is each individual jack is a TRS stereo jack. So when effects loop stereo is selected, we could go stereo in to a stereo delay, and then out to a stereo loop, back in stereo, and then into delay 2 stereo in, and then out as a stereo signal. So there's really quite a versatile I/O configuration available. We also have a wet-dry signal where one output is wet, one is dry, and we have wet-dry-wet configuration as well. So whatever your needs might be, how you're using it in the studio or in your rig, you're going to be covered here. TimeLine MX also includes a looper with a 5-minute recording loop time, and the looper can be positioned either before or after the delays. So as you can imagine, there's really an unlimited amount of sounds that you can create with 2 delays happening in a variety of configurations. We've got a lot of great sound samples and examples in our sound samples videos, and we've spent a lot of time curating this set of presets to give a great variety of dual as well as individual delay sounds.